Yeah, folks, believe it or not, it's time for a Hearthstone card review. Today we got our first look at the Cataclysm Class Set. These class sets are going to be replacing mini sets for this year at least, maybe even more into the future, who knows. And basically, throughout the year, for each expansion, a batch of classes are going to get some cards. So basically, it allows Hearthstone to make more cards per mini set for a given class. So this time around, for instance, Mage, Hunter, Druid, and Paladin are each getting 7 cards, so that essentially, you know, they're going to have a bigger impact. You know, in old mini sets, you only got 3 cards per class. It's kind of hard to like print a deck or support for an archetype. But this time around, you know, they can really commit to it and make sure to make an impact, which I think from a design standpoint is actually ultimately a pretty good idea. I hope the pricing isn't weird or different. I haven't looked at that yet, but I think it could be a good idea. Of course, if you have a favorite class, you might get left out for a little while, but ultimately this seems like a good change to my eye. We'll see how it shakes out. So anyway, we're going to take a look at a bunch of cards today, including some legendary, kicking things off here with the Arcanomicon, which is like the Necronomicon, but arcane. It is a new 7-mana legendary spell. It gets all 3 ley lines, which you're probably thinking, what the heck is a ley line, Regis? Don't worry, I'm going to show you. And then you get to choose an upgrade for your ley lines. You'll see those upgrades here right next to me. You've probably been reading these the whole time I'm yapping. Here are the ley lines. These are basically kind of like Librams almost, where they're like a class of spells that, you know, you can essentially upgrade and interact with. The crystallized ley line is 6 mana and summons you a random 6-cost minion, which this one's not great, you know, on its own, but if you upgrade it, for instance, and it triggers an additional time, like suddenly you get 2 bodies for 6 mana. That might be worth it. Also keep in mind, these are both collectible spells and you get them off the Arcanomicon itself. So, you know, you can have a bunch of ley lines in your deck. There's also the bursting ley line, 4 mana arcane, deal 4 damage to a random enemy minion, and then excess damage hits the enemy hero. So kind of a clear kind of some potential face damage, which again, keep in mind, you know, this can upgrade, increase the effects of your ley lines by 2. So this can be deal 6. You had a 1-drop, that's 5 damage to face, right? Or 1 health minion, I mean. That's 5 damage to face. We've also got the Leyline Nexus. This one allows you to draw a card. It costs 1 less. This actually, to me, just looks solid, almost playable as is. Just like, you know, find something, discount it a little, create a cheat opportunity. But then also, you know, it could be 0 mana, draw a card, it costs 1 less. Or it could be draw a card, it costs 3 less. You know, basically a Farsight for only 2 mana. And that's the leyline package as we have it today. We're not going to see any other mage cards, although I'll tease this hunter card for now, save that for later. But I have a feeling we're going to see other ways to interact with and empower these leylines. It doesn't feel like this one card is quite enough, much like Librams, you know, there are other minions and stuff that interact with the ley lines. I'm basically keeping my eyes out for those as we see the remainder of the mage cards. We're going to see 3 more mage cards as a part of this class set, and I think they're probably going to be leyline enablers, maybe not all of them, but I'm expecting some additional help and discounts. So as I look at these today, I will say, like, I don't know if this would be quite enough on its own, but I'm not writing them off because, you know, we're going to see more cards. Sadly, they just haven't been revealed yet. So looking at the Arcanomicon itself, the pronouncing that, it never rolls off the tongue clearly. So this is basically a value generator. It's getting you 3 cards. I will say, like, man, they are expensive as is, though. Like, you know, you're not going to be playing these right away after you play your Arcanomicon. That sounded like the right way to say it, Arcanomicon. You know, even with like a 2-cost discount, if you choose unblock here as one of the upgrades, like, yeah, you could draw a card, but like, you know, you're basically spending a 7-mana turn doing nothing. It's kind of a pass. So you know, this is really going to have to rely on the other leyline cards to make it feel like it's worth it. Some other discounts in the mix, a deck that's slow enough that it can afford to take kind of a down turn 7 perhaps, or another big spell cheat kind of thing where this comes out earlier somehow, and then starts to swing because, you know, maybe you've gotten multiple upgrades to your ley lines throughout the game, and suddenly it's like, you know, if this is a 4-cost spell that summons 3 6-cost minions, you're like, boom, okay, this is where things are starting to cook a little bit. But, you know, that does demand a pretty full commitment, and at a baseline, these cards do not look very good. You'd think at a baseline, you kind of want to take 1 mana off of all of these basically to make them great. Maybe Leyline Nexus be fine as is. It's not great, it's just fine. So it is a challenge, right? It is a commitment to really make this worth it. It doesn't like scream great to me at first glance, just because this guy is really, really slow. Like this one's a lot of work. It's a 7 mana card that's doing nothing to the board immediately. You know, it would almost be nice if it's like, if it said, you know, get all 3 ley lines, you know, your next one costs 0 or something as well, right? So you could recover a little more tempo out of this immediately, because right now it is ultimately quite awkward. Moving on to the Crystallized Leyline. At a baseline, you know, again, a card no one would ever play. Obviously, random 6-cost minions not going to be worth it for 6 mana. You'll get random junk. You'll get, you know, understated minions, things that don't synergize with a given game plan. You know, it's going to be a really bad result on average, occasionally fine. Even getting like 2 of these, 2 random 6 costs, like that's solid. I don't think that's a card you'd play though in your deck. Like 6 mana summon 2 random 6s. A lot of decks wouldn't play that actually. Like there's still too many low rolls in the 6-drop pool to make that consistent. So you need multiple ways to really make this guy worth it. You know, I'm not going to score these cards in particular yet, just because we're going to circle back and see these down the road with the rest of the mage cards, kind of get a complete picture on this. But I will just say, like, this one needs a lot of work to make this a playable card. You know, starting at 6 mana is just so expensive. Next up here is the Bursting Leyline, 4 mana, as we said. This one's a very inefficient board clear at a base. Like 4 damage to random minion sucks, right? Like that's just going to hit random 1/1 sometimes. Even if you had a 4/4, you're not like pumped about spending 4 mana to do that. Really, really awful. The excess damage, again, on its own, useless, right? Like if you use this on turn 4 to clear a 2/2 or something, who cares about 2 face damage at that stage? Maybe if you've juiced this like crazy and you're getting, you know, multiple upgrades somehow, and it's like super cheap and it's got extra damage in it, then like, yeah, you know, if this is clearing 4 or 5 things somehow and they're all taking 3 or 4 excess damage, and it's like, okay, suddenly I hit the opponent for 12, 15 somehow, sure, but it's going to take some more cooking than what we have right now. Like just Arcanomicon's not going to be enough to make Bursting Leyline worth it. So again, a card, it just looks a little overcosted and clunky at a baseline. And then finally for the ley lines is Leyline Nexus. This one certainly looks the most playable just because it's cheap. You know, I don't think you'd really run this on its own. It's just a cycle basically for a slight discount. It sort of lets you invest mana now for a little bit of a mana upside later. It'd be hard for a deck to really accommodate this, but you could. Like you could play this and not feel too bad about it if you had some big stuff you just wanted to cheat out a turn or 2 earlier. So this one feels the best at a baseline to me. Also, you know, has upside as well when you're upgrading it and stuff. So the best core leyline as far as I'm concerned here is Leyline Nexus. All right, so moving on over to Hunter here, we have Talia Earthstrider, a 5 mana 4/6 battle cry. Your cards that summon animal companions summon 1 more this game. So any sort of animal companion card, which again, this is a cool little like cycle of animal companion support, is going to get an extra animal companion roll on it. It's going to summon a random one as if, you know, an animal companion card would anyway. So you might get an extra Huffer, you might get a Leok, Amisha, whatever. You guys know that. Now, looking at standard format right now, the animal companion cards are these 3. You've got animal companion itself. So, you know, anytime after turn 5, basically, because this is this game effect, not an onboard effect, this is a 3 mana, you know, sometimes summon 2 Huffers or whatever, which that's really good. You know, of course, inconsistency is still tough, but you know, Mishas and Leox are still solid cards. I think this actually becomes playable with Talia Earthstrider. Brol Bearmantle also in the mix, right? Like there could be some crazy turns here where you get Brol down, you cast a few cheap spells, 0 cost, 1 cost, whatever, and you end up with like 6 animal companions on board. You know, somebody's gonna roll 6 Huffers off this and kill the opponent because of this crazy, you know, little chain of stuff. So like this on turn 5 and do Brol on 6 or 7 or something, you get a monster board of animal companions. Then you have Call of the Wild. Now the wording on this is not that you'll get like 3 extra. You're not getting like duplicates of each. It's your cards that summon 1 more. So you don't get 6, you know, it's not per animal companion, it's per card. So I don't really know if that would make Call of the Wild worth it. That said, it probably depends a little bit on more animal companion support, right? It's, you know, how many cards in this cycle are we going to get that are supporting animal companions and making those better? That could push Call of the Wild into viability. Otherwise, 8 mana for 4 animal companions doesn't really feel like as big of an upgrade, right? Like, you know, it's a lot more commitment basically for that to feel worth it. So, you know, this is a bit of a downturn. It's a bit of an investment, but if your deck's fully committed to it, it's certainly one that can pay off. I guess my question is like, how good will animal companions be for multiple turns throughout the rest of the game, right? Like, can you win games in Hearthstone these days by getting extra little dudes on turn 6, on turn 7, turn 8, or whatever, right? Is there enough kind of incremental upside on these animal companions that you eventually just grind out the opponent or overwhelm them with huffers or whatever? I have some questions about that. You know, board clear isn't quite as strong as it used to be, but also the animal companions are smaller. You know, they still do just die to Medivh's whatever, Medivh's Triumph and Priest or something, right? There's still a lot of little board clears to deal effectively with 4 health or less. So that's an issue. That said, the next card could change that if you run this, because we're seeing another hunter card today. This is Tame Pet, 1 mana spell, which by the way is a cheap enabler for Brawl. Replace your future animal companions with random beasts that cost 1 more, which is really interesting, right? Because we just saw these animal companions, right? These all cost 3, as you know. So you're getting 4 cost random beasts instead of animal companions. But here's what I'll say. I think animal companions are better than random 4 cost beasts. So you can maybe play 2 of these, right? Or maybe there'll be future cards to do even more. And you're talking about like, okay, can I get 5 cost beasts, 6 cost beasts, 7 cost beasts? Where it's like suddenly worth it, right? How big do your beasts have to get where they're consistently better than animal companions? They're random beasts, so these could be across like any class, right? As well. So for instance, like, you know, just looking at the pool of beasts, you know, 5 cost. Worse than all of the animal companions. You'd rather have any other animal companion. Devious Coyote, I would say arguably worse. Arashi, I would personally say probably worse. Close, like a 5/5 might start to be worth more, right? Like, you know, Garishi Wasp is probably an upgrade. Hollow Direhorn's probably an upgrade, right? Like some of these are fine, but not amazing, right? So like 5 is solid. We didn't look at 4s, but I'm just saying right now, like 4s are not going to be better than animal companions on average, so we don't even have to look, right? 6-drop beast pool, you know, a lot of effects like Diabolus Rex, not great, right? It's just a 6/5. Like 6/5s are okay, they're better than 4/4s, but you lose all those keyword upsides, you know. Stuff like Ankylodon would be amazing, right? Like that would be a great result. Evergreen Stag's amazing. Epoch Stalker, probably a side grade. You know, I'd maybe rather have this than a Leok sometimes, sure, but like not amazing. So like, you know, Hideous Husk, pretty terrible, right? Krogwa, it's really not much better than Amisha. I might rather have Amisha sometimes, right? It's just a mixed bag, right? Ulfar, awful, just awful, right? Awful 6-drop. 7s and 8s, you know, obviously you're gonna start getting to a point where the stat break points are just worth it, and some of these have great effects, you know, Draco Rex. And no question, if you get up to 7, 8, 9 somehow, that's gonna start being worth it for sure, right? At some point, it's just like, how much do you have to commit to really make these animal companions worth it? And then still, ultimately, it is just minions for minions' sake and kind of like board development later, where it's just like, I'm summoning 2 random 8-drop beasts every turn. And it's like, well, okay, is that worth it? I will say Call of the Wild, if you're summoning like 4 or more random 8-drops, like, yes, those are some monster boards. I think it's potential. You know, we'll just have to see the rest of the list, right? Like, we haven't seen all the cards yet. Again, I'm not going to review these yet for scores until we see all those cards. So yeah, maybe. I worry a little bit about that game plan overall, though. Moving on to Druid, we got a new legendary here. This is Bashana Rune Totem, a 7-mana 4/4 with Battlecry. Get 3 2/2 treants. Carve 12 mana worth of nature spells into them. So you can see here, that's a 1 mana treant you can play that potentially has some like really big spells. Now, I was told by Blizzard, I can't totally confirm all this, but what I understood was this is going to work a little bit like the kind of shaman spell, where is that, Instant Multiverse, where, you know, when you play this, it can like pick an 8-drop and a 3-drop and a 1-drop, right? And those could be your 12 mana worth of things. So the costs are sort of randomly distributed. Same thing with the treants. You might get an 8-cost spell, a 3-cost spell, and a 1-cost spell, or you might get 3 4-cost spells. Some divisible aspect of 12 put into 3 treants. So you could get a 1-mana 2/2 that has a monster, you know, giant spell on it, which right now in Druid, I don't really even know how many big spells we actually have. I feel like most of Druid's big cards are minions these days. But we might get one printed in the new set, for instance, you know, but also, you know, even a 1-cost card with a 4-cost spell or something on it might be pretty solid. Looking at like big spells for Druid, there really aren't a lot. Best in Shell, man, there's almost nothing. Geez. But, there could always be more in the future, too. So, you might get a 1-cost card that does something great, but keep in mind, you're also playing a 7-mana 4/4 in the meantime. So it's like, even if you save for 8 mana, you won't always get a great turn out of that. Even cheating a 6-cost card out, it's like, well, Best in Shell plus a 2/2 and a 4/4 is not like an insane turn or anything. So very worried about that. Like, super inconsistent, super unreliable, not necessarily something you want to do for a Treant deck either. Maybe a ramp deck just gets this down soon enough and like, hey, I can take a swing turn off 3 Treants and just create, a 12 mana turn basically that also develops 6/6 in stats. That's a possibility, but the spells are going to be so inconsistent that I worry how well that might actually work out. So outside of some other hook here, I feel like this needs one other hook to make it really sing to me. Right now, it just looks inconsistent and hard to work with. So the next rune card we've got today is the Wizened Wild Speaker, a 5-mana 3/7 with Taunt and Battle Cry. If you didn't play a minion last turn, refresh 3 mana crystals, which is a pretty cool little hook here. Not quite a like all-in spell, no minion type deck, but one that could maybe benefit a little bit from alternating or having a primarily spell-based focus. We've already seen like Imbue Druid with, a very spell-heavy deck where it's like, hey, sometimes I might get kind of a free, 2-mana 3/7 taunt in essence, where I can have a nice little swing turn, stabilize on board with this 3/7, and still get something else out alongside it, which I kind of don't hate. I think, a lot of decks could do this very naturally. I don't even think they really have to change much about their game plan. They'd be like, hey, look, we're going into turn 5. I want to have a 4-cost spell. My deck's got a few 4-cost spells that are very naturally played on turn 4 to line this guy up on turn 5. That creates a really nice swing on turn 5. It's like, yeah, 2-mana 3/7 taunts aren't mind-blowing, but for a deck that's looking to go a little later, they're certainly fine to help you stabilize while you do everything else in your deck. So ultimately, I think this one's totally fine to weave in and looks like a good option for some spell-heavy decks. So then our final 2 cards here are Paladin. We've got Erator the Redeemer, a new 5-mana 5/6 with Battle Cry, double the stats of all friendly Silverhand recruits and give them Taunt. Keep in mind, this is not like a this game effect. This is a one-time effect. You're using this on board as like a big board follow-up when you've managed to stick some Silverhand recruits. So at a baseline, right, that would just be a 1/1 buff, sending it from 1/1 to 2/2. I don't think I'd be totally excited about that, but this clearly seems to be kicking off some Silverhand recruit synergies in this class set. So hopefully there are going to be some other ways to buff Silverhand recruits. What do you know? We found one, the Emboldening Blade, 5-mana 3/2 Battle Cry. Give your Silverhand recruits +1/+1 this game. So here we go. We have a this game style effect where now you've got some ways to make a big investment. This alone sends your Silverhand recruits to 2/2. You play a second one to get them to 3/3, and then play your Erator Redeemer. It's like, okay, now I'm turning them from 3/3 to 6/6. And I got a board full of 6/6 taunts. Or, I use this as sort of a bloodlust, basically, where anytime I stick a board of decent Silverhand recruits, now I get to double those stats and, just absolutely kill the opponent with my Wide Swarm. So it becomes this kind of bloodlust threat where it's like, if I'm needing it as an aggressive end of game threat, I can use it that way. Or if I need to stabilize behind some taunts, I can also do that. So you kind of have flexibility a bit depending on your matchup, which could actually be pretty cool. I can imagine a kind of mid-rangey Silverhand recruit deck, mid-rangey specifically because like these are expensive cards, Emboldening Blades 5-drop already as a setup. Although, you could also technically use this as a follow-up. You have a board on turn 4, you play this, buff them immediately, kind of, push some damage there. Power of the Wild your board while also getting a weapon up. But I can imagine mid-rangey for sure, where you can build some Silverhand recruit boards out on turn 6, 7, 8 or whatever, and try to find a window of either stabilization or lethality off of your Erator the Redeemer. Again, though, we just kind of need to see more pieces of this puzzle to know exactly how far this can go. So talking specifically about the Emboldening Blade, this is a 5-mana 3/2 weapon. Battle Cry give you Silverhand recruits +1/+1 this game. I mean, this game effects are always great. That's cool. That's nice. Little bit of a concern on timing on this, though. Like, I feel like if this was even just a 4-cost weapon, that's a much easier thing to time out. Sometimes it's easier to slot around like opponent removal. You can kind of stick a board on turn 3, play this on turn 4. We've actually got Muster for Battle as kind of a perfect example of that. But you start getting into these windows where the opponent kind of answers all your Silver-Hand recruits, and it feels like you're Emboldening Blades. If it's not buffing the board immediately, this is a really down-tempo play, because you're just equipping a 3-2 weapon on turn 5, and it's like, man, I'm doing nothing on board this turn. I'm only setting up for later. So it'd be really nice if when you play this, you know you're kind of getting some immediate impact in play, which won't always happen on turn 5, right? Like, this would be so much easier if this were a little bit flexible. Or alternatively, I think, you know, if this said, you know, after you attack, give your Silver-Hand recruits +1/+1 this game, that could also help in a way, because you'd get 2 durability instead of just 1. So it would kind of give you more depth to the effect and not rely so much on the hopeful immediacy of the effect as well, because, you know, you just scale a lot further. And like equipping a second Emboldening Blade in particular might feel really punishing later in the game just to get another little +1/+1 buff. So part of it might just come down to like the mix of cards that are available, but I will just say like 5 mana is pretty prohibitively expensive. Like it's not easy to play a 5 mana setup card like this always. So that does make me a bit nervous for this one. Oh, and I almost forgot, neutral card got revealed. Cultivating Sprite, new 3 mana 3/3 Battlecry. Get a 3-cost bulb that casts 3 random 1-cost spells, and then it upgrades each turn. And the blooming bulb you can see there. This is basically Gorgon Zormu. If you guys remember Gorgon Zormu, the dragon that got this exact same kind of card, but it was with minions, summoning 3 minions. And I believe those were a 2-cost cheese as well. So it was kind of a 5-cost play in total. Did this guy get nerfed though too? I can't remember all the details. Anyway, I do think the Cultivating Sprite here is notably worse than Gorgon Zormu, which was actually a great card and got played a ton, right? If you got that down early, that cheese could give you a pretty solid, crazy board in the mid game often for only 2 mana. I think Blooming Bulb, although it has the same sort of scaling, it's just that spells are way less consistent of a result. You know, like when you summon minions, you know you're always getting minions. Yes, they're a mixed bag on quality, but they're directionally aligned and they're making you a board, and it's going to be stats in play. 3 random spells, even if they're 6 or 7 cost spells or whatever, you have no idea what you're getting. It can just be an absolute mixed bag of wasted stuff, removal when you don't need removal, card draw when your hand is too full, you know, face damage that just is totally irrelevant, synergy stuff that doesn't do anything for your given deck or whatever, right? Like so many things that can just absolutely backfire and be a problem, whereas the like ways for Gorgon Zormu to backfire are way lower. It can't like screw you really theoretically, but you know, very, very unlikely to screw you. And you kind of just knew even if the low rolls happened on stats, you're still getting stats. Low rolls, results, nothing is really a result off Blooming Bulb. So it's like, why are you running this, right? Like, is it really going to be worth the trouble to just get a bunch of random spells? It also just costs more in total. So I think like I just, you know, a much worse version to me than Gorgon Zormu, and I just don't really see decks making an excuse to run this one. I just think it's far too chaotic. All right, so all that said, we I guess can give one card a score, but I'm gonna wait for the class cards to score those, just because, you know, clearly these are gonna have additional synergies printed. That's the whole point of these class sets. These cards aren't exactly standalone cards. So let's go ahead and rate Cultivating Sprite from 1 to 4 or 5 stars. Cultivating Sprite is indeed a 2-star card. So there you go, folks. Excited to see the rest of these, man. Leylines package looks really cool. Animal Companions is kind of a nutty idea. Don't exactly have a feel for what Druid's all about just yet. Feels like maybe more of a mixed bag, but maybe some like no minion or limited minion stuff. And then Dudes are back. So curious to hear your thoughts on these cards. What do you think we're going to see for future support pieces here? What's going to be good, bad? Try to lock your predictions in now before we see the remaining cards here over the next, I think, few days or so. That's it. Thanks much, as always, for watching. And until next time, game on.